Hi guys, Chris with Microsoft here with another fun-filled and exciting episode of What's New in Windows Server 2012. We're in the middle of an ongoing sub-series of this series on Active Directory. This is going to be a continuation of that. We're going to be talking a little bit more about the Active Directory Administrative Center and some of the new things that we've added in as far as tools for this. So the last one we were talking about the Active Directory recycling bit. Now we're going to be talking a little bit about the new graphical user interface that we've added in for fine-grained password policies. Before we dig straight into where this is and how to use it, just real quick on background on the fine-grained password policies. These really started in 2008. We introduced these. It was very common, very common request from our customers to go in and give them the ability to assign different groups of users different password policies, which is just not natively capable in a domain. If you want to be on a different set of password constraints than, say, your neighbor, you're going to both have to be in two separate domains. We added it in 2008, but we didn't actually have a graphical user interface for it, really. Although we're that's a difficult thing to actually say because, oops, where's my mouse go? There it is. Because the fact is it did have a graphical user interface, and I don't know why I'm not able to concentrate on what I'm doing today. It's just, if you consider ADSI edit a graphical user interface, then there you go. So you go into System, and then you go to Password Settings Container, and right-click on that, and you say New Object, and so we've got an MSDS Password Settings. And then you can walk through this wonderfully beautiful screen. Yeah, okay, so this maybe wasn't the most straightforward or usable way to go about creating PSOs or password setting objects. So we've made this a little bit easier, actually quite a bit easier, by putting a graphical user interface to it. So first off, it's still in that same place. We're still going to have to go into System, and then we're going to have to come into the Password Settings object, or Password Settings Container, rather. But once we're here, now we have this neat little thing where we can do new password settings and get a much better graphical interface for that. Now, if you weren't real pleased with how we got here with that whole digging around and think you're not going to remember it, there's a neat new feature in Active Directory Administrative Center where I can actually right-click in here and say Add a Navigation Node. And then I can come in and do what I just did a second ago, going into System, going into the Password Settings Container, toss that over here, say OK, right-click it, rename it, maybe call it PSOs. There you go. Now, real easy to get to. See? And we would say New Password Settings. And we get this really nice, much easier interface. You just give it a name. We call this password setting object. Let's actually give it something a little bit more intriguing, like IT password settings. And give it a precedence, which we'll talk about here in a second. I'm going to give it a precedence of 3. Actually, I'm going to give that a 2. And then we can go through and do all our stuff. In a little bit, we can talk a bit about how to set up your passwords. It's a bit of a deep discussion. It's a very controversial discussion, so probably not going to get into that real deep at the moment. Now, this isn't based on organizational units. That may come as a surprise to most people, because in the past, the way that we would set up a set of passwords is actually inside of group policy. So what I'm going to do is show you the way that we would do this before, group policy management, and then we're going to come in through the forest here to the domain, and then we're going to go look at our group policy objects. We're going to have this default domain policy. Now, this default domain policy is going to be linked to the root of the domain. And a lot of people in the past have tried to go through and link this to link a new group policy object and put it on an OU, because that's kind of how you manage your group policies, right? then they'd try to change the password policy, put it in an OU, and then have those users actually pick up the new policy, and then they were frustrated when they find out it didn't work. It doesn't work because at this level here is the only place where you're going to find where we can actually link that. Now, you could create your own linked group policy objects right here, and push this link order around until so you don't have to actually fiddle with a default domain policy. But while it is best practices not to go fiddling around with the default domain policy, it's real easy to fix them if you break them. You just do the command dcgpo fix, and it'll annihilate the default domain controllers and the default domain security policy. And maybe that's not the best strategy, but my advice for most mid-market customers and medium and small businesses has been go ahead and edit this at least for the default domain policy, since that's where a lot of people keep it anyway. So what you're going to do is still use this. Your strategy will still be to continue to use the default domain policy to manage, let's say, 85% of your users. You're going to pick your overall password policy, which is found just right under here, Windows settings, security settings. We got our account policies right here. So we got our password policy, we got our lockout policy, curb policy. You'll do this still for most of your users, and then you'll override this for special groups of users. Most companies, I can't imagine needing more than 3. You'll have one probably for your domain admins. You definitely want to lock those guys down, preferably with a separate account. Right? We'll have one account that's a standard user, and then one account that's what I would call a utility account that they could use when they need to do something special, and have those locked down with a much tighter password policy. So then we would link that to the domain admins group, so that automatically anybody who's a domain admin gets that. Then you might have another option like HR. So the HR people obviously have some sensitive payroll data that that they have access to, so maybe we do or do not want to have them locked down with a little bit tighter security. If you do, then you can just assign a password policy to them that's maybe just a teeny bit more restrictive than the standard users. And then in a lot of companies I've found that it's not uncommon for the executives to want their own password policies, and it's something silly like 4 characters with non-complexity and it never expires. So while I don't agree with that, hey, they signed the paychecks. What are you going to do, right? Alright, so this is how we override it. We would come in and take our IT policy and say domain admin, and now we're directly applying to that group. Anybody in this group is going to automatically be a part of this, right? You can apply to multiple groups. Like if I have an IT security group, I can add them in there. And in this case, what we might be doing is something like enforce a lockout policy, right? We would never lock out an account until an administrator manually unlocks it under normal circumstances. Highly not recommended to do that, because if you do that, then your users will simply just write all their passwords down. We've proved this again and again through academic research that this can be a very, very high security risk. But your admin's slightly better trusted group, so maybe we say after 15 bad attempts, we just lock it, right? And a password hacking utility that's going after an account at 6 million attempts per second is very unlikely to guess it in 15 tries, right? And then maybe we might say something simple like 30 days. And we'll always have this at least 1. This keeps people from defeating this right over here, passwords remembered. Maybe for our IT guys, we want to set that so that it's going to be a really long time before they can. And maybe for these guys, we want them to have at least hello 10, not how's that? Right. So this is how we've set this up. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Maybe in our case we're going to have a couple of these. Maybe we're going to have another password settings that is just for the previously mentioned director, so we might call this D-level password policy and put it as a precedence of 1. Why would I do that? Well, let's say that I got a director who's also going to be a member of that IT admins group for one reason or another. We want him to pick up the director policy so he doesn't call in complaining about it. This will simply mean that he'll pick up that policy over somebody else. So in his case, the D level, we're going to have maybe a password length of 4 characters. We're not going to have any password history. Does not need password complexity requirements. This is not, by the way, recommended by any means whatsoever. But this is what your directors will ask for, obviously, and no lockout policy, right? And so we might. I think I created a group called directors. Yeah, there we go. So we'll add that directly into the directors group there. All right, so we got ourselves a couple of password policies. Now, how do we know that this is working? All right, so that's another really cool thing about this whole thing. If I go into my user accounts and I come down here, I'm going to look at my favorite illustrious Kyle Busch user, favorite NASCAR driver that I always like to use when I'm creating any labs. I'll go see, hey, what do we have for Kyle Busch? So I can right-click on Kyle, and I can say, View Result and Password Settings. And it's going to pop up, it's going to say IT Password Settings. So I can see right here which one he's actually picking up. Kurt Busch, on the other hand, his older brother, is not in IT. I see his, and it says, hey, he doesn't actually have a fine-grained password settings. He's just picking up the default domain password, right? So I'm fairly sure I actually made Eddie Gossage become, there he was, a director. Let's make sure that's the case. Eddie does not have that, so maybe it was Mike Helton. Let's see who's Mike Helton. No. Well, there's a much easier way to find out, right? Let's go to the directors group and see who is members. Okay, well, Eddie is in there. Must have just missed something. I'll be feeling silly later when I review this video. But this does give us an opportunity to look at one other cool feature that was going to be the next bullet point that I would talk about. But now we'll talk about it right here. As you can see, inside of your user accounts and in your groups, you can see all directly associated password settings right here. So it's another way to see what's taking effect. So if I right-click on Eddie, and I'm just too curious. I got to know why the member of didn't show. Oh, he's right there. I don't know what the heck I was looking at. Okay, everybody who already saw whatever silliness I just did is probably giggling at me right now. But I don't care. Giggle all you want. Okay, view result and password settings. There we go. We can see that he has picked up the D-level password policy instead of the actual IT password policy, even though he's a member of both groups. So there you go. Okay, let's get out of that. There's a weirdness with my mouse flipping out on me. It's because I'm using a little touch mouse and not my actual sliding mouse. Maybe that's what I should be using. Okay, so that's password policies. I want to show one extra thing off on the Active Directory Administrative Center. And it's this thing down here at the bottom that maybe you didn't even notice. Windows PowerShell history. Everything I've been doing throughout the last 2 videos of me showing the episodes showing the Active Directory Administrative Center has been going on right here. So you see when I pull that up, I can see all of this stuff. Remember all those restores we did? There they are. If you want to know how to do it in PowerShell, it's right here. So if you'll remember in the previous episode, we set the forest mode up to 08R2. We enabled the recycling bin right here. We set a few of these, let's see, there we go. So we removed and restored some Active Directory objects. Here just a few minutes ago, we did some stuff like new fine-grained password policy. Right? So everything we're doing is actually happening down here in this bottom. Now, where that can be very, very useful is you can quickly come in here and copy this and then dump it into, again, a PowerShell ISE window. So let me just pop them in a new one. And I could go through this and figure out what I needed to do, maybe write a script and create a whole bunch of these. Right? Another thing I can do is say start a task. So I'm going to call this new user task. Maybe I want to know how to create a user in Active Directory using PowerShell. So what I might do is come down here to users and I might say new user. We'll name this one after my lovely wife Lisa. We'll give her a SAM account name of Lisa and a password, because that's the most secure way to do it. And there she goes. Go up to where my task started, and see this whole task is in this group right here, and I can copy that, and then I can use it again. So maybe I'm not very good at scripting, but if I need to create a bunch of users, oh, I should probably copy the whole thing, huh? Might be a little bit more useful. So this can be useful for A, hey, maybe you want to learn some PowerShell. B, maybe what you want to do is do a bunch of menial tasks over and over again, and you don't want to have to sit here and type it. Maybe what we're doing is just changing a couple of these. You could change a couple of the inputs here and then just re-hit the run over and over again. Obviously we can't do that because she's already in there, but another little piece of this is show all. If I do that, now I'm going to get verbs. So if I go in here to the users container and refresh it, come on, get in here. Let's go to domain controllers. What I'll get is the verbs for that. So you can see I've got get AD object command right here. So now I'm getting my my verbs. I'm getting my get object, so I can go around and browse around and see how to actually navigate through. So not just doing things, but actually coming around and pulling things out. So this is a pretty neat tool. It could be helpful for A, either learning some PowerShell, or B, maybe just figuring out how to do something that you need to do a bunch of one-off, but you don't want to learn a whole lot about PowerShell. You just want to see what's going on in the background. So this can definitely be a useful tool. And so maybe hopefully that'll be something that can help you out. But anyway, guys, this has been Chris with Microsoft. As always, I really appreciate you watching. If you found anything about this useful at all, please give it a quick like in the link below, and feel free to subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have another subscriber on my little YouTube channel here. My blog is also at 9z.com. It's real easy to remember. It's just the last number and the last letter .com, and that's got links to my Facebook, my LinkedIn, my Twitter. And as always, thanks a ton for listening, and I'll see everybody in the next episode.